Hello, in this video we're going to be talking about how to do percent composition by mass of elements in a compound. So to do this we're going to need a formula, and our percent composition formula is that we're going to take the mass of the part we're trying to find, whatever element that is in our compound. Mass of the part goes over the mass of our whole compound, and then we multiply that by 100, and that gives us our percent composition. So there are two different ways that we can get problems to find percent composition. The first one is where they're just going to give you a compound, like let's go with CO2, and they're going to ask you to find the percent composition of carbon and oxygen in carbon dioxide. So the first thing we need to do this is we need to find the molar mass of carbon dioxide. And if you need help finding molar mass, there's a molar mass video to help you find molar mass of compounds. But I happen to know that the molar mass of carbon dioxide is 44.01 grams per mole. So now we're going to go ahead and solve for the percent composition of carbon and oxygen in our compound. So when we do this, we're going to go ahead and plug these numbers into our formula. For carbon, we need the molar mass of carbon to go on top because that's the mass of our part we're trying to find. So the molar mass of carbon is 12.01. And the mass of our whole compound is 44.01. And then we take that and we multiply that by 100. For oxygen, it's going to be very similar, except this time we're finding the molar mass of oxygen, which is normally 16, but there are 2 oxygens in our carbon dioxide, so we have to account for that in our percent composition. So instead of putting a 16 on the top, we're actually going to put 32 on the top because that's the mass of 2 oxygens. And then we divide that by 44.01, which is the mass of our whole compound. And we times that by 100. So that's our setup for getting both percent compositions. And when we solve those out, when we do 12.01 divided by 44.01, and we times that by 100, you should get 27.3% is carbon. Then for oxygen, you take 32, divide that by 44.01, you times that by 100, you should get that the percent of oxygen is 72.7%. So in carbon dioxide, we have that carbon makes up 27.3% of carbon dioxide, and oxygen makes up 72.7% of carbon dioxide. So this is how we do the first type of problem that wants us to find percent composition. So now I'll show you how to do the second type. For the second type, we're still going to use the same formula that we had on the previous screen, that we have the percent composition is mass of the part over mass of the whole times 100. But this time they're going to give you some numbers in the problem. Like let's say that we have a problem that says that we have 1.03 grams of oxygen and 0.77 grams of carbon in our compound, and now it wants us to find what the percent composition of each of those things in our compound is. Since they gave us values, they gave us a 1.03 grams of oxygen and this 0.77 grams of carbon, we don't use the values off the periodic table because they gave us some values. So how do we find the mass of the whole in this case? Well, they give you the mass of the two parts that make it up. So to find the mass of the whole compound, you just add these two parts together. And when you do that, in this case, you should get 1.80 grams. This is the mass of your whole compound. So now we're going to do our percent composition for both oxygen and carbon again, using the same formula, except now with the numbers that they gave us. So we're going to go ahead and use, for oxygen, our 1.03 grams that they gave us, divided by the mass of the whole thing, which is our 1.80, and then we times that by 100. For carbon, we use our 0.77 grams that they gave us in the problem, divide by the mass of the whole thing, which is our 1.80, and then we times that by 100. And when we do that, we'll get our percent compositions. So for oxygen, we do 1.03 divided by 1.8, times that by 100, and we get that oxygen makes up 57.2% of this compound, and carbon, we take 0.77, divide that by 1.80, we multiply that by 100, and then we get that carbon makes up 42.8% of our compound. So in this case, we get that oxygen makes up 57.2%, carbon makes up 42.8%. We didn't need to use the periodic table at all for these types of calculations. So this is how you find percent composition of a compound based on the elements that make it up.